All right, welcome back to College Football Addiction. Going to talk one of the bigger games in the country this weekend, Alabama, Tennessee. I've got Drew from Tighter Insider as well as Talking Ball on Huntsville's 97.7 ESPN. Drew, how you doing, man?
Good, TJ. Great to be back on with you, man. It's funny how this season's kind of unfolded. I know for you, the Knowles have had a rough one, but it's been not been out without its bumps with the University of Alabama. I know you came down for the Georgia game, and I was there. It was as electric as atmosphere as I've ever seen. And Kalen DeBoer wins that game. Everybody's thinking, that wow, this is a lock college football playoff team. What a smooth transition it's been to Nick Saban. And to quote another old Florida Stater, that would be Lee Corso. Not so fast, my friend.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a wild 3 weeks when you think about the spectrum of the highs and lows for Alabama. What is what even is the mood right now? And I asked that question a lot, and I didn't really think I'd be asking it today a few weeks ago, but where are people right now?
I'd say apprehensive only because, look, we're living in a bizarro world right now where Vanderbilt in the portal era and the NIL with NIL is two plays away from being undefeated and ranked in the top 10 in the country and
Yeah.
has beaten Alabama for the first time in 40 years. And then everybody said they wouldn't be able to stand prosperity, and they beat Kentucky on the road this past Saturday. So I think they're definitely a top 25 team. They definitely physically whipped Alabama. I was on press row in Nashville, and the Tide they never could get over the hump. They could never get the lead, and they played well offensively, but not great, because if they had played great, like if it was 2020, Steve Sarkisian and Mac Jones in that group, then you can still outscore the opponent. But they made two or three mistakes. The defense was horrendous, and they couldn't get a stop, and they give up 42 minutes of possession time, and they lose a 40-35 shootout. And then this next week, I'll just be honest with you, TJ, I still am not quite sure what I watched from press row and on Saturday morning and for the brunch date against South Carolina. Alabama came out, looked solid, not spectacular. Looked like they had a chance to have a 14-0 lead at half, maybe get another possession, have a chance to go up 17-0, 21-0. But we all know what happened. Fourth down, 36-yard touchdown strike. Then, a kickoff, a stupid penalty, a personal foul backs you up inside the 10. Your senior quarterback goes brain dead, or redshirt junior, I should say, but he's a really good player, one of your captains. He commits just a blatant intentional grounding to get a safety, and then your head coach, and that's why I'm saying apprehensive, decides after they get a stop after the free kick, okay, there's 10 seconds, 11 seconds to go in the half. Let's just run the football and go into the locker room. Oh, no, we're going to throw the football. Intercepted. Lucky it wasn't a pick six. South Carolina gets the field goal. And in a minute and 37 seconds, it's gone from 14-0. Now, all I just talked about, you would think that would take 30 minutes. But in a minute and 37 seconds of game time, we're all looking at each other in the press box. It's 14-12. And Alabama was very fortunate to get out of there with the lead. And then South Carolina comes back out, another 8-minute, 40-second drive, and heck fire. Before you know it, you look at the clock after Milroe's interception in the end zone. There's 3 minutes to go in the third quarter, and Alabama's down 19-14. So, some of the decision making, the way Kalen DeBoer handled the end of the half and then the end of the game to almost lose to South Carolina, who's a solid football team, but it's a game that should have been 27-7 if it was run properly. And so, I guess everybody here in Tuscaloosa and in the state of Alabama is just trying to get a grasp on how Kalen DeBoer runs a football game. He handles situations totally differently than Alabama fans are accustomed to with Nick Saban for 17 years. And I don't know, man. I've been telling people, invest in Maylocks, bourbon, whatever, because look, the Vanderbilt game went down to the last possession. South Carolina did as well. You were there. You saw how Georgia rallied in the second half. The last 2.5 games has shaken some people's confidence in this coaching staff, and they're apprehensive going into this third Saturday in October in Knoxville.
Well, if there's any kind of solace or any kind of I'll ask you, how much of a consolation is it that Tennessee's struggling with some things on their end too? And, I think the Tennessee from 3 weeks ago, people would be scared to death of right now if they were heading to Knoxville in this game, losing to, Oklahoma kind of figuring them out in the second half and making that closer, and then Arkansas beating them. And then, if Billy Napier wouldn't have coached himself out of a win, Florida should have beaten them this week. Has to make you feel a little bit better, like at least they're going through some struggles too. And so, maybe we're in for a classic game of incompetence, but, maybe makes Alabama fans feel a little bit better about Saturday.
Probably so. I mean, I would say if Alabama had handled business against Vanderbilt and had, even after having the slow first half, TJ, when Alabama cut it to 23-21 in Nashville to start the third quarter, if they had done, if you remember the Tennessee game from last year, Alabama played a horrendous first half. They were down 20-7 at halftime, but then outscored them 27-0 to win going away. If Alabama had done similarly to Vanderbilt and then beat South Carolina double figures, I think the confidence would be supremely high, especially with what you've seen out of Tennessee the last 2 weeks. But even if Tennessee was playing well, but I just think, right now you lose to Vanderbilt. You're lucky to escape against South Carolina, but you're right. As fortunate as Alabama, was to win Saturday, but Tennessee could easily be on a 2-game losing streak. And we had a caller today on Talking Ball point this out at the very end of our show. If you go back and look at Tennessee's SEC slate, they play Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold started the game, but then they went to the backup Hawkins, who really struggled, and they couldn't generate anything until the fourth quarter. And then you go back and you look at their next SEC game against Arkansas. Taylon Green gets knocked out of the game. The backup quarterback beats Tennessee. And then you look at Saturday in Knoxville. I mean, DJ Lagway nearly beat them. And if you're Billy Napier, look, I love Billy. He coached at Alabama. I got to know him. But my God, they should have had a bigger lead at halftime, just like Arkansas did. But if you got one play to win a football game on the road when your seat is already scorching hot, you should have one play in your arsenal that you think is a 2-point play that, look, I'm 80% sure this is going to work if we execute it properly. You should go for the downs because you have nothing to lose. You're not going to make the playoff anyway, and you can really get maybe part of the fan base back if you pull out that 18-17 win. Because if you hit that 2-point conversion with less than 30 seconds on the clock, I don't think Tennessee is going to score. So, to me, you're right. I think Billy kind of coached his way out of it. But now, with Kalen DeBoer the last 2.5 quarters, Alabama's not played good football in 10 quarters, really, roughly. There's some shaken confidence. But you're right. It's interesting. Alabama's still a 2.5-point favorite right now, 3 some places. I picked Alabama to win at 34-27 because I simply look at it this way. I've watched both teams play. If Jalen Milroe takes care of the ball, if Alabama can make a few adjustments defensively and kind of bottle what they did at the end of the South Carolina game, which was play aggressively and attack, I think Alabama's got the better football team. I think Tennessee's good defensively, but their offense right now is hit or miss. Now, the one key, though, is Alabama has struggled a little bit with their run defense, man. They have got to stop Dylan Sampson because if I'm Tennessee, I'm going to challenge Alabama physically, and I'm going to continue to feed him. And they've got to find a way to slow the running game down because they gave up 132 yards rushing, even with the adjusted sacks to South Carolina. And we know what Vanderbilt did to them. So, to me, it may be an old school game. I may be a little bit too generous with the score there, but I think Alabama is more explosive. And I think that the Crimson Tide, if the defense can create some turnovers, that was kind of the difference in the South Carolina game. They created 3 turnovers, 0 against Vanderbilt. But if they can win the turnover margin and they have the older quarterback, then I think Alabama can win this game. But it's definitely going to be another one where it goes down to the wire in the fourth quarter. But I just like Alabama's team a little better than Tennessee's right now.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that, Tennessee's offense has Nico's looked like a freshman, the last couple of games. And, if he, you can't play the if game, but if he hits a couple of, he had some guys streaking behind Florida's defense and just missed him in the first half, right? And so you play the if game with Florida, like, oh, if they had not done this or if Napier had done this differently, maybe they have a bigger lead. Well, Nico just hits 1 or 2 of those guys. They score 14 or 17 in the first half. And so you kind of wonder, but it's hard for me, to see him go up against Alabama's athletes, which are certainly better than, Arkansas's and Florida's, and think that those guys, that he's going to all of a sudden be on. But I do wonder this too. I wonder if which I was going to ask you about Sampson, and so I think that's a great point. Like, if he gets off, if Sampson runs well, then that, Bama certainly will be in a little more trouble. But they've looked reluctant to let Nico run, and I don't know if that's Josh not letting him run. I don't know if that's Nico just hesitant to run. But I do think they could take advantage of his legs some. And Pavia ran a little bit. Obviously, Sellers runs. I mean, shoot, the kid at USF ran a little bit and did okay. I think if they want to win this game, that probably needs to be Tennessee's X factor is letting him move a little bit.
Yeah, I think so because as you said, Diego definitely his mobility hurt Alabama. Certainly, that's the case with Brown from USF as well. And then, at times Sellers did on some quarterback runs. He had a big fumble, which I thought was the turning point in the game when Milroe threw the interception at the end of the third quarter. Everybody I think is another Vanderbilt. And then first play, Sellers fumbles the football. And so that really helped Alabama. The Crimson Tide was able to score and retake the lead, which kind of calmed everybody down. But you're right. I wouldn't be surprised if they ran Nico a little bit. But Alabama they need to adjust. They need to spy the kid. They need to keep him in the pocket. And I was just watching him down the stretch of the Florida game. His head's not moving. Like he's staring right at guys. He was lucky down the stretch in the fourth quarter. He didn't throw a pick or two. In Alabama, they did have Damani Jackson got one to seal the game. And, Sabs made some plays back there. And Zabian Brown against Georgia. I think they'll have some opportunities if they can pressure him to turn them over. And that's what they're going to have to do because if Dylan Sampson gets off, that means – and I know, Heupel, he almost has to change his way he's coaching right now because he loves to go fast and score quickly, but they're not really built that way. Their defense this year is much better, and they need to try to control the clock against Alabama because Alabama is more explosive. And if Sampson's getting 150 yards rushing, that's an easier pathway to win for Tennessee. So to me, Alabama's got to stop the run, got to contain Sampson, and got to win the plus minus. And then they got to make Nico uncomfortable and move him off his spot. And I think that'll lead to some of those turnovers. But to me, that's what they've got to do. They've got to attack on both sides of the ball. You've got a quarterback in Jalen Milroe who's been through enough fire now. He's been on the road in these contests. He should be perfectly comfortable with what they're doing. And then here's another thing. Two underrated things where Alabama was without a couple guys. They should. Now, and again, we'll see when the injury reports come out Wednesday and then again Saturday. Kendrick Law warmed up, but he did not play. He's the best blocking wide receiver on Alabama's team, helps them on the edges, plays with a lot of physicality. And then they didn't have Kobe Prentice either. And that's two of your top four receivers. Now, if they have those guys to go along with Ryan Williams and then Jeremy Bernard, then I think they've got enough weapons with C.J. Dupree at tight end and Cuevas. They can give Tennessee a lot of problems because they can spread it out. And then Milroe has, he can use his legs. So I just like Alabama. I think they have a few more weapons, proven ones anyway. And another thing that I watch kind of closely is Florida had some success running the ball on Tennessee. So if Alabama can be balanced, I think they can find a way to escape Knoxville with a win, but it's certainly not going to be easy.
Yeah, the other thing that I thought Florida did pretty well, and their defensive line is not necessarily touted as one of the better ones in the SEC. They got after Nico in the first half. Now, Tennessee was able to shore some things up, I think, in the second half, and they had some shorter fields. But, man, they sacked him. I think they had as many sacks in that game as they had all year against Power 5 competition. And, if Bama's edges and if they can get pressure up front, I know they've been somewhat suspect against the run, but if they can get pressure on Nico, I mean, that is what led to the mistakes early. And second half, they didn't get as much pressure, and Nico looked a little bit better. And so I think that's another place that Bama has an advantage, but just having the advantage because me and you were talking about it doesn't really mean a lot. Like, you got to go out and play on Saturday. But I do think they can get pretty good pressure on Nico. That's also if I'm Heupel, I roll him out some. I try and get him away from some of that because if Florida's getting pressure on you, I have a hard time thinking that Bama won't be able to do some of those same things.
Yeah, and then another thing too, he's been on a pitch count the last couple of weeks, but Quay Russaw is Alabama's best edge. And what I mean by that is they have a pass rush position, the outside stand-up backer called the Wolf. And he's and they've got some depth there, but they did lose Jan Zapier. He's out for a while, got hurt in the previous game against Vanderbilt, so their depth's been affected. Q Robinson, a senior, has been playing there. Also, Keanu Kuda Jr., but really Quay's a sophomore. He's the best athlete on the team. He got injured a couple of weeks ago, but he came back, and he's been on a pitch count ever since. And sounds like just Kane Womack, who spoke earlier to the media today before lunch, that Russaw will be let's just say he'll be available for more snaps. And that'll be big for Alabama because he created the sack fumble, again with Carson Beck in the Georgia game. He's a big physical guy. He can play the run and rush really well, and he will be a guy maybe that could spy Nico Iamaleava and play a big part of the outcome of this game if Alabama's going to win it.
Drew, where I know you said you like Alabama, you kind of lean that way. Where can people follow you? Where can they hear more of your work as we get closer to kickoff later in the weekend?
Oh, no doubt. On X, Drew D 977 ESPN. And, of course, our station is at 977 ESPN. And then, of course, if they want to hear our show, Talking Ball, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Central, 8 to 10 Eastern. And then, of course, you can check all our content out on our SoundCloud page, 97.7thezone.com, or either ESPN 977 thezone.com on our website. But we always enjoy talking to football with you, TJ. It's going to be a big weekend again, no question. That Texas-Georgia game is very interesting because I don't know that the Horns have been tested yet. And I know Kirby wasn't happy with how they played Saturday, but I think they'll come locked and loaded to Austin. That's going to be an interesting one as well.
Yeah, there were too many good games on at one time last week, and then we've got that is a very bad thing to complain about, but a lot of good games last week, a lot of implications this week as well. I wouldn't necessarily call this Tennessee-Bama one like an elimination game, but it's getting pretty close. Like you got to be pretty perfect if you drop this one. So it should be a lot of fun, man. I appreciate you a ton for hanging out with us for a few minutes, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon, bud.
Yeah, thank you, PTJ. I always enjoy being with you.
Thanks, buddy.